Hello and welcome to our latest webinar. This time we're looking at foliar nutrition on the maize crop. As we go through the webinar, we'll cover various topics. Start again with the basics of nutrition. It's always important to remind ourselves of the fundamentals. We'll then look at individual nutrient requirements of maize and what the functions are and what deficiency looks like. We'll then look at foliar applications of nutritional products. We'll have a look at biostimulants and see if they have a place. Just review some of our recent trials work, and then that'll lead nicely onto our key recommendations. So I always want us to start with the basics, and the basics come back to the Liebig's barrel. The only bit from Yara that we can influence is the nutrition. If the crop yield is limited because there's too much compaction, or there's not enough sunlight, or there's too much rainfall, there's not a lot we can do about that. All we can do is influence the nutrition to ensure there is no nutrients that are lacking within the plant, which can then impact yield. The starting point for this is always the soil, and the most critical thing to get right is the soil pH. And often we find that soil pH is suboptimal. Suboptimal pH will lead to limited nutrient availability from the soil. And with the maize crop, some key important nutrients would be things like phosphorus. You can see it's a very, very narrow band. And we recommend pH of 6.5. Anything below this, then you can see nutrient availability drops off. Why is it so important? Because actually it allows you to access nutrition from the soil, and it prevents lockup of nutrient that is applied to the soil. A picture paints 1,000 words. And I've shared this in numerous webinars and numerous farmer meetings, but it really is a great picture just to show the impact of lime. And you can see here, this droughted grass has clear lines in it where throughout the whole football season, lime marker paint was used. And that lime marker paint has had a liming effect, which has released more nutrient from the soil, improved grass growth. So really, really key that we get that pH right before we do anything, because if the pH is wrong, we can then put nutrients on, which are locked up instantly. Critical starting point. When we look at the maize crop itself, then key macronutrients are the NPK, and actually I put magnesium in this as well. Sulfur has an important role, as does some micronutrients, manganese, boron, and zinc actually is probably one of the most common nutrient deficiencies we can see in maize, that can lead to reduced growth of the plant. Again, when we go back to basics, when we look at the nutrient requirements, this is kilograms on the left, kilograms of nutrient required per ton of grain yield. So this is grain maize, and you can see with something like nitrogen, it's 16 kilograms of N per ton of yield. Something like phosphate, it's 7. On the right hand side, we have the micronutrients. So something like zinc I just spoke about. Yes, it's important, but it's worth pointing out it's only required in grams per ton, much less. So again, the key message to me is we need to get the macronutrients right, then we can then optimize with the micronutrients. But the macronutrients, the right rates, the right timings, and the right place is a critical starting point for everything we do, because they all have very, very important functions. The majority of the functions around improved yield with maize. So when we look at the individual nutrients, they all have a key role to play. The majority of nutrients, particularly the macros, are all around optimum yield and quality. You can see from these pictures what happens when nitrogen is limiting. The bottom right picture, optimum nitrogen, better cob uniformity. Nitrogen deficiency, big problems. There is a massive demand from nitrogen for the crop. A 40-ton crop can remove up to 160 kilos of nitrogen from the soil. We're actually only allowed to put 150 kilos on if you're in an MVZ in England. So you need to actually optimize nitrogen use efficiency as much as we can. Part of that also links into the fact that peak demand is at the tasseling stage. when you hope the crop is 4 to 6 foot tall. Quite difficult to apply nitrogen at that stage with traditional methods. We'll talk about that later. And again, nitrogen availability is reduced from the soil, so low organic matter, high pH, and periods of drought. The crop cannot access it from the soil. Conversely, when we get periods of heavy rainfall or irrigation, we can actually leach it through the soil. So again, a number of things working against us with nitrogen. When it comes to phosphate, again, you can see it here, what it looks like. We've all seen this, stunted, purple, horrible looking maize crops. Often when we've had cold, wet soils, we then get some nice sunny days and the maize crop can go from shin high to knee high in 48 hours. So the soil conditions have a massive impact on phosphate availability. We've covered it numerous times with the pH. It's such a narrow band of availability. Anything high or low pH, then we have issues. Poor root systems, we may have phosphate in the soil, but we can't actually access it. So having a good, strong root system is really important for phosphate availability. And soil temperature. As soils warm up, phosphate becomes more available. So cold, wet soils, real negative impact. And it's all around even maturity. Again, early applications improve establishment and root growth, just like they do in any other crop, and ultimately leads to increased crop yields. Potassium, the crop can take off a huge amount of potassium. So again, it's something not to be overlooked. So if you're not in a situation where you're putting regular applications of farmyard manures, etc. on, my advice when it comes to fertilizer, don't forget potassium. Something to think about. Although we do know a lot of crops grown in livestock situations will be getting organic manures back into the system, and AD maize will often be getting digestate back as well. But if you're not putting those nutrients back with organic forms, then don't forget it, because again, it's all around improved uniformity of the cobs, healthy green foliage, and again, ultimately, it's all about increasing yields. It's common practice. Again, just like with other crops, light sandy soils or high rainfall can lead to leaching of potassium, and then drought conditions can lead to potassium not moving around the plants and not becoming available. And conversely, things, soils where you've got high magnesium indexes will lock up the potassium that's in the soil. And then magnesium, again, we spoke about it on many crops. It's chlorophyll, it's photosynthesis, it's green foliage, increase yield, and it can actually move harvest forward. You can get early maturity, or conversely, it can be delayed if there's serious magnesium deficiency. And again, cold, wet periods of drought where water availability is limited, and sandy soils generally issues with magnesium availability. And again, you can see there on the pictures what it's like. And then when it comes to micronutrients, zinc is probably the most important one for the maize crop. And you can see there what happens to the foliage when we've got zinc deficiency. It's quite clear to see. And again, organic soils, high pH soils, soils with high amounts of phosphate in them. So we have these soils around the country where we're at index 4s and 5s of phosphate. That can have a negative impact on availability of zinc. So zinc is something to think about. And again, it's all about yield, and with grain maize, it can actually have an impact on grain protein, just like it does on milling wheat. But a key micronutrient not to overlook. When we look at samples that have come in through the lab at Pocklington, then you can see a number of maize crops are actually deficient. So that it's not a massive data set, it's 1,700, nearly 1,800 samples. But you can see there 60% of crops, not enough phosphate in the foliage. 70% of crops, not enough potassium. 80% magnesium and 40% zinc. So they're all key nutrients that are actually lacking when we can see the tissue analysis coming in. So we need to address them. Again, fundamentally, what we need to do is start with getting the right nutrient on the soil or in the soil at the right periods. And when it comes to maize, the fact that it's traditionally grown on sort of 75 centimetre rows, although there has been a move towards more 50 centimetre rows, for me, I always ask the question, if we're broadcasting, how much of that fertilizer is actually wasted? Because if those granules are falling in between the rows, and that maize crop is a lazy rooter, and then roots are just going down and not out, how much of that is going to be wasted? And not only that, in all those areas, all it's actually doing is feeding weeds. So actually targeted placement of fertilizer is really, really key. And again, for me, it's always a starting point with maize, successful maize. Placement of fertilizer at drilling is key. And the two critical nutrients, in my opinion, would be nitrogen and phosphate. Get them placed at drilling to give that crop the best start. Put that phosphate where it's needed. It's very immobile in the soil, as we've touched on many occasions. So get it near that seed where it's going to be utilised. There's no point in broadcasting it a foot away. Get it as close as we can. And I don't know how clear this picture shows up on the screen, but certainly on the left-hand picture there, you know, it's a small amount. Will it actually, does it ever translate to yield? It's quite difficult to say, but you can clearly see there those 6 rows that didn't receive the starter liquid fertilizer at planting. We've got lower plant growth. That crop is already backwards, so it's not going to be as early to harvest as the crop that received it. And it's not massive amounts. You know, we're talking 16 kilos of placed nitrogen and 33 kilos of placed phosphate. But you can see on the right-hand pictures, if you pick the 2 rows out, it's clear as day. You know, that crop where the fertilizer's gone is always going to be ahead, much healthier crop. When we look at foliar applications on maize, the reason why it works so well is because there is a big demand later in the season. When we've already applied our fertilizer early, because physically we cannot get through the crop at that stage, either with a spinning disc spreader, because we wouldn't get a spread pattern, or if we use traditional liquid fertilizer late, we have a massive scorch risk. So often we find that fertilizer is applied much earlier, but then the peak demand isn't until later. So this is where foliar can really come into its own in supplementing that soil applied fertilizer or organic manure we put on pre-drilling. We then supplement that and optimize our growth with the use of foliar YaraVita products later in the growing season. And we spoke about phosphate, mentioned it when it comes to placement. The reason why foliar phosphate works really well is because it needs to be so close to the roots to be taken up. And with all the other interactions within the soil, whether it be soil pH, whether it be soil temperature, a poor root system, by pushing phosphate in through the leaves, it's an efficient way of delivering phosphate straight into that plant. And historically, it's been a massive market for us in the maize crop with YaraVita Maize Boost. However, I need to point out at this point that the Maize Boost name is changing. We are changing the name of Maize Boost to Crop Boost. And we're doing this because the product is used on so many more crops now. That foliar phosphate product with the added zinc in fits really well on cereals. It fits really well on potatoes. And we have people who will say, well, I can't use Maize Boost because it's for maize. So what we've done is we've actually changed the name to Crop Boost. It is the same product, but Maize Boost will gradually disappear from the market as the stocks dwindle. But for any of you maize growers out there that may make a phone call and be told we don't sell Maize Boost anymore, everybody does, and it's called Crop Boost. So the product is still available. It's still the product that you all know, and we know it's widely used on maize. You know, I'd nearly go as far as saying it's the #1 maize foliar product out there in the market. It's just not called Maize Boost anymore. It's called Crop Boost. Exactly the same product. Use it exactly the same way with exactly the same rates. And just a reminder of what it is. It's a high concentration of phosphate. So that full 5 litres a hectare he's putting 2.2 kilos of phosphate straight into that plant where it's needed. And when we think of the maize crop, it's got useful amounts of potassium, magnesium, and zinc all in that product. So widely tank mixable. So yeah, the same product, different name. Same pack sizes, available in 10s and 1,000 litre IBCs, but now called Crop Boost, not Maize Boost. The product's been around years. We know it's been around years. I'd say it's widely used in maize. And the reason why it's widely used in maize, because it promotes both foliage growth and particularly root growth. And that's what we're aiming for. Them early applications to get them roots down as deep as we can so they can access more nutrient from the soil and more water when we go into drought periods or periods where crop growth is limited by a weather factor. You know, these are actually very old slides, and this was done many years ago at Pocklington, where we've got two pots on the left. It's a pot of maize grown with 25% P requirement, 25% mag, and no zinc. The same pot on the right, but with the foliar application of the Crop Boost product at 5 litres a hectare. And you can see we've got a much bigger, healthier plant. And then on the right-hand side, we can see a much bigger root system. Some pictures I took last year at the glasshouse at Pocklington. So those pictures were probably 10 years ago. And you can see there again, on the right-hand side, we've got the Maize Boost plant. On the left-hand side, we've got no Maize Boost. Same scenario, 25% P, 25% magnesium, and no zinc. And then the foliar application on top. And you could see we've got a much healthier, greener plant on the right-hand side. And also where I've just put the pen up, you can see we've actually got thicker stems as well. So bigger root system, bigger leaves, bigger foliage, and actually thicker stems. And you can see there a close-up of the foliage. These pictures were taken at the end of last year in the glasshouse. So again, you can see it. Again, look at the root system, left-hand side, right-hand side. Absolute massive difference. So in these, we've grown it in water with no phosphate at all, and we've just added the Crop Boost to the right-hand pot. But you can clearly see there the difference in rooting, a much bigger root system. And these were actually taken only 3 weeks ago. And every time we do this in the glasshouse, we get this same response. And that's why we know it's used in the field widely on maize. So if you want to improve early growth, particularly root growth, but also plant growth, 5 litres a hectare of Crop Boost is our core recommendation. And you can see pictures paint 1,000 words. That's what it does. But ultimately, it's all about getting a bigger root system to improve nutrient use efficiency so that the maize crop is not lacking any of those key nutrients. So I mentioned at the start, biostimulants, do they have a role to play? Actually, in maize, I think they can have 2 roles to play. They can help with that tolerance to abiotic stress, and they can actually improve nutrient use efficiency. It's a bit harder to quantify crop quality in maize. For me, crop quality is more about high-value crops, so fruit and vegetables. But for maize, I think we focus on the first 2, the abiotic stress and the nutrient use efficiency. And nutrient use efficiency can generally come from stimulating increased rooting. And this is a relatively new product for Yara UK, a product called Bionui, which is a mixture of humic and fulvic acids. And when we put early applications of Bionui onto the soil, and you can see here these 2 maize plants are just grown in boxes, we see on the left in this example an increased root system, and then we also see earlier increased vigor, and that's an application applied to the soil, so around the rhizosphere. And no matter what crop we do this on, whether it's tomatoes, peppers, wheat, oilseed rape, maize in particular really stands out. We see the Bionui effect every time. So this is where the biostimulants can help with nutrient use efficiency. We've also trialed Bionui in maize trials where we've looked at early foliar applications. And again, we get very nice yield increases. So relatively new product, but we get this impact. And this impact was astounding. So this is where we did the foliar applications, the soil applications, then we followed it up with a foliar application. And we always start the plots early, and we see that improved rooting early and improved early foliage growth. And then the two pots on the left are untreated and the Bianui treated. And you can clearly see there's different shades of green. You can almost liken it to a Fendt green on the left and a John Deere green on the right. What we then find is when we analyze the tissue, we've got more nutrient in the leaves, and the soil is exactly the same. So definitely it's improving nutrient use efficiency. The pots on the right, I asked our technical manager at the glasshouse just to leave some to see what happened, and you can see the results, what happened when we just left them. Look at that difference, it's massive. So biostimulants are definitely doing something. I know the jury's out. I know a lot of people think it's muck and magic, but there's definitely some magic happening in certain scenarios. And the maize crop with Bianui seems to be one of those. And I know it's being looked at in trials again this year on maize outside in the field to see if we can start to repeat this glasshouse work in the field. But yeah, really interesting to see. But that's definitely got to be improving nutrient use efficiency. When it comes to managing stress, then I picked out some work from a colleague in Germany a few years ago, where this maize crop in Germany was suffering from frost and then herbicide. So what we did in this trial was we just did a very bog standard trial, which I think was applied very early. I wouldn't recommend applying maize boost and biotrack at the 2-leaf stage of May. I think it's as maize, it's very, very early, but in this trial they did, where we added the maize boost and the biotrack to the herbicide mix just to see what would happen. And you could see there the plants were very, very stressed. It was very frosty, the soils were very dry, and you can see there the impact 5 days after the application. That combination of the foliar nutrient product in the maize boost, same product, crop boost, called maize in Germany, with the biotrack had stimulated that growth. 5 days after application, we already saw a positive impact. The real impact was shown a month later, and you could just see there the difference in crop growth. So again, clearly there's an impact. But what I would say as well is this is where we see it with biostimulants, is that combination of the nutrient product and the biostimulants working in harmony. One shouldn't replace the other. They actually do work much better when you put them together. But yeah, it's a real life situation. It was just a farm trial. Yes, it's in Germany, but frost and weather similar to what we get here. And also, we also know with the maize crop, it does come under a lot of stress. As I said at the start, we've all been there in maize fields that are struggling, whether, if it's wet and cold or it's dry and hot, it struggles. But you put moisture and warmth together, boom, it grows like billio. But also with a maize crop, we do tend to hit it quite hard with herbicides, so it does come under a lot of stress. So biostimulants can actually have a role to play. So what we've done here in Yara UK is actually with our replicated trials, we've looked at the combination of the crop boost and the biostimulant in the last couple of years. And the first trial was done in 2021, and you can see there the untreated is in the dark blue on the left. We've then got the maize boost, the Foliar P, the crop boost product. We've then got the crop boost plus the biotrack, and then we've got the biotrack on its own in the right. And you can see that actually the green, the combination of the two, the dark green, is the one in that trial that led to the highest yield increase, around 4 tons a hectare in that trial. We repeated similar trials this year, yields much higher, but again, you can see there untreated in the dark blue. We've then got the foliar phosphate, the crop boost, giving around 3 ton a hectare, and actually the combination of the biotrack and the crop boost in this trial was not as significant as the previous year, but still there was a very marginal increase, but it's the same. It's not really had an impact. What's had the big impact last year was that that crop boost. You know, that is an absolute must for me with growing maize. You know, you look there again, you're looking at 3.5 tonne a hectare yield increase in dry matter tonnes per hectare. So for me, the crop boost is a must. The biostimulant, yeah, again, if I'm somebody who wants to look at biostimulants, maybe look at it in that maize crop. If you've got a crop that's struggling and you're going to hit it with a herbicide, you know, it may well be worth getting that biostimulant on before that herbicide, because we've seen it in other crops. We've seen it in sugar beet, we've seen it in potatoes, and we saw it in Germany. When it comes to nitrogen timing, we've already said that there is a massive demand of nitrogen at tasseling. However, we apply most of it early in the growing season for practical reasons. What I would say is foliar nitrogen products are an ideal choice for that late timing. And when I talk of foliar nitrogen products, I don't mean melting urea down or using true liquid fert, because the scorch risk is obviously very high, because by the time you go through the crops at that stage, obviously you're getting into June, July timing. You hope it's going to be hot and sunny. I'm talking of the true foliar nitrogen products that you put into the sprayer and spray them on through a conventional nozzle. There's many out there, but from our range, we have YaraVita Safen. It's available in 10 and 1,000 litre IBCs, and it's around a 30% nitrogen-based product. And again, these are widely used. Our product's a mixture of various nitrogen forms, so you get the quick uptake for nitrogen, and then around 25% is in that slow release form, which will keep it feeding as we go through the months of August into that tasseling period. So wide tank mixability, however, I'm not quite sure what will be going on at that scenario. We have done trials before with various fungicides at that timing, and we know they're tank mixable, but again, check the tank mix website first. And yeah, we haven't done, it's fair to say we haven't done masses of trials, because actually to try and do replicated trials, I'm not quite sure how anybody gets through a crop at that stage. But we did do some in 2016, and you can see there we've got the untreated in the blue at 42 tonnes a hectare, and the maize boost plus Safen, or followed by the Safen, sorry, should I say, was 46, so around a 4 tonne a hectare yield increase. So our core recommendation for the maize crop would be 5 litres a hectare of the crop boost at that 4 to 8 true leaf stage. If you think we're in a stressy situation, you can add in that 2 litres of Biotrack to help mitigate that stress, whether it be from weather or from herbicide applications. And then we then want to follow up with 20 litres a hectare of the Safen product at the pre-tassel stage, so almost as late as you can get through with the crop sprayer. So that's our core recommendation. Just a final reminder that Maize Boost has not gone away. It's now named Crop Boost. So, you know, if you're ordering the product and somebody says we don't have Maize Boost anymore, ask for Crop Boost instead, because it's the same product. So the take-home messages on maize: placement of nitrogen and phosphate fertilizer will always give that crop the best start. I would then apply 5 litres a hectare of the YaraVita Crop Boost at 4 to 8 true leaves, which will give all those key nutrients straight into the leaf when the crop needs it the most. Biotrack at 2 litres a hectare applied in combination with the Crop Boost will improve tolerance to abiotic stress and can deliver an improved yield increase. Big demand of nitrogen at that pre-tassel stage, so I would go with 20 litres a hectare of YaraVita Safen, pre-tassel as late as you can get through. What will then that do? That will feed it through the tasseling stage and keep the 25% of slow release, will keep it feeding throughout the growing period. That covers everything we've got to say today on maize. There's a couple of basis points, 2 plant nutrition points. Just point out that this code is for the basis season 2022-2023, so it's valid until the 31st of May 2023. After that date, we'll be in a new year. So this is the code for the 22-23 season. I hope you found this webinar useful. As I've said, you know, when it comes to tank mixing, please always check on tankmix.com website. In the YouTube channel, we have another webinar on the tank mix service, so please have a look at that as well. And thanks for watching.